as you'll know shortly, I'm not a public speaker, but I and a fellow producer, oil and gas producer friend of mine, have several wells that we produce. I got started in the oil and gas business. First of all, my name is Bob Lane. Some of you may have known me from the past. I own Bob Lane's Welding Incorporated. I'll be on the Washington County Career Center and Bethel Oil and Gas Company as a production company. And Bob Wilson, a friend of mine, and I have quite a few wells down at Dunn Township, down Route 7 where the Catfish Pond is. Turn right there, go back in there. Between the two of us, we have several 3,000 to 5,000 acres under lease back there and multiple wells on it. And it's a long story and I don't want to take up a lot of time, but I have two sons who are petroleum engineers. One of them works for a large independent he lives in Wyoming, and he's a production superintendent for this oil and gas company out there. They have wells from North Dakota clear down to the state of Mexico. And I confide in his ability to answer some questions and stuff about the problem we're having back here with this disposed water. They are hauling water now from Pennsylvania clear up to the New York state line. All these horizontal wells are fracturing down here in Washington County. They're bringing practically all of West Virginia's wastewater to Washington County and Athens County and disposing of it in wells. And one of the major concerning issues is this stuff getting into our drinking water? I have wells. I just drilled the last well I drilled. The bottom fell out of natural gas prices. I haven't drilled any since, but it was about 6 years ago. It was one of the best wells I drilled down at Constitution, right here below Marietta. And for all practical purposes, it is totally ruined now. It costs upwards of $100,000 to drill wells, about 2,000 feet deep. And it was probably grossing me about $4,000 to $5,000 a month. And then this water started coming in on it and completely took it over and ruined it. My friend Bob Wilson has over 40 wells down in that area that are flooded now. He says every day he gets up, he loses $5,000 from what his production once was. And to get a little deeper into this, my son, who graduated from Marietta College, and I'm kind of proud of him, he had the highest grade point average of his graduating class. Practically every major oil company in the United States flew him to their offices wanting him to go to work for them. But he come home here, he comes home every year, and I go out there to visit him once a year and see my grandkids. But he come home and he said, "Dad, I need to show you something." And he pulled a map off the internet of a fault line. There's a lot of people know a lot more about this than I do. But he showed me where this fault line runs parallel with the Ohio River on this side of the river. Clear from up north, clear down through Athens County, Meigs County, clear down through there. He pulled up a map from the Division of Oil and Gas in Columbus, similar to that map behind us there where the green dots are and all the wells that are drilled in that area there. He pulled a map up and had all the disposal wells down through here on it. They are all drilled right down through there parallel with that fault line. And he explained to me, just a little bit of background about what's happening here. He explained to me that you can put a light fracture in a drilled disposal well along the fault line. In every other state in the Union, it's totally illegal, highly illegal, to permit a well next to a fault line because of these problems. He said you can put a light frac in it and it'll frac over into that fault, the natural fault line. He said a lot of those wells will take wastewater, this disposable oil and gas water, will take that wastewater on a vacuum for quite a while until the fault fills up to a certain elevation. And then they start pumping it in there under pressure. He said that's when the trouble begins. He said it starts toward the surface in that fault line. And when it gets up so high, he said it'll get in your drinking water. We have hired attorneys. This lawsuit's been going on for probably close to 2 years now. We filed it in Washington County Common Pleas Court. Our attorneys did. The two judges, the common pleas judges there, said they couldn't hear it as a conflict of interest for them. Yeah. Because it had damaged so many of our wells and put them totally out of production. It's just like someone damaging your personal property, burning your garage down, your house down, and you expect it, and you certainly expect some kind of recourse against someone who would do something like that. This is our personal property, these wells. We got a lease on this land that they're drilled on. And all oil companies don't have a favorable reputation, and I know that. But we filed this suit in Washington County Common Pleas Court. It's been over a year ago. They wouldn't hear it because it was a conflict of interest for both of the common pleas judges there. They brought a retired judge in from Perry County. He'd been retired for 6 or 8 years, getting up into years. And he ruled against our suit, said we didn't have a suit. Incorporated in that suit was a letter from the Attorney General's office of the state of Ohio saying that they had come down here, tested the water in our wells that were flooded with this water and totally ruined, and that it did come from the Redbird disposal well out of Vito. And they threw our case out. Well, this Judge Lewis from over in Perry County, they brought him in here, or they wouldn't hear our case, so they brought him in here, and he said we didn't have a case. So our attorneys appealed it. And this past October 28th, they traveled over to Pickaway County, which is right below Franklin County, where Columbus is, to a 3-judge appeals court panel. And they told us, Bob and I, that they hoped that they would get something back from that appeals court panel by the end of the year. And I talked to them last week, one of our attorneys, and he said they hadn't heard anything yet. And I told him, I said, this is beginning to weigh pretty heavy on my friend and I. I said, we feel damaged, really damaged. We've got landowners that have been getting gas on some of the wells that we produce down there for 30 and 40 years to heat their house with, run out of gas and have to switch to propane because there's no utility gas companies down there, Dominion or whoever. And they are irate. And the remaining wells we have down there are probably off a half in production if they aren't completely flooded because this water just comes in as they haul more in here. And our biggest concern, Bob and I can only speak for us, is that we know for a fact that this water, if it isn't stopped, and it may already be in our drinking water. The last person our attorneys have spent upwards of $750,000 in professional witnesses from Texas, Louisiana, which is an oil and gas state and has had these problems. Texas has had them. Pennsylvania's hauling all their water down here because they had these problems up there and ruined people's water. And so they haul it from, if you ever go up Route 7, just watch for the water trucks. You'll see them. They run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. From West Virginia, they come across the St. Mary's Bridge and across the bridge down at Belpre, and they run Route 7 down to Washington County. Washington County, I think, alone has 18 disposal wells in it. That's more wells that's in the whole state of Pennsylvania. I think maybe they've only got 3 or 4 active wells up there now because they've had this trouble up there. And there's been so much stink raised about it that they're hauling their water down here now clear from the New York state line. New York won't allow them in the state. So they bring it here. I think the state of Ohio, and don't quote me on the exact amount, but I think the state gets upwards of 30 cents a barrel for every barrel of water brought into Ohio from out of state. And the list goes on. The last professional witness that we had up here came all the way up here from Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I would say that the gentleman, I'm a poor judge of age, but I would say he's close to 65 years old. He went down to one of my wells, met my pumper there that was flooded. And he made my pumper put on rubber gloves for both arms. My pumper thought he was out of his mind, and put on a suit, like a rain suit, before he'd let him draw the water out of the well. And we go out and work around these wells every day and don't think that much about it. And they pulled a 3-gallon container full of water out of my well. And he went back to his vehicle and he got an instrument out of there. I think it was something like a Geiger counter, detected radiation. And he set it by that bucket of water, turned it on, and he looked at it and he told my pumper, he said, "My God, who's running this state?" And pardon my language, but that's what he said. He said, "These people have to be crazy." He said, "To let this happen." He said, "If this gets in your drinking water, you'll never drink it again." He said, "There is no way known to man on planet Earth how to take radiation out of drinking water." And he said, "You've got plenty of it here." And we're gambling with that, folks, and that's why I came here tonight. We haven't heard anything back about our lawsuit from the appeal. We're hoping to hear it. The last thing my lawyer told me last week when I called and asked him if he'd heard anything or got any good news, he said, "No, Bob." And he said, I can feel your frustration. But he said, "Believe me, if we don't win here," he said, "we'll take this thing, if we have to the Supreme Court. It is wrong." And I suppose in the last month I've had 5 people come to my welding business looking for me. One gentleman came there and I was standing not too far from the front door and he came in and I thought, "Boy, this guy's mad about something." And I'd never seen him before. I didn't think they fixed anything for him when it broke. And he said, "Are you Bob Lane?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "What do you know about these disposal wells flooding our wells?" And I'd never seen a guy before. But his father had bought 2 wells on a farm that he owned. And he had a house on there of his own, his father. This boy inherited the farm and he moved into his father's farm. And by that time, he'd got another well. They had 3 wells total. And he said, "All 3 of our houses are out of gas. We have no heat for our houses." He said, "All 3 of those wells were flooded within 3 or 4 weeks of each other." And he said, "What can I do about this?" He said, 2 or 3 people told me that I needed to talk to you. And I told him about our lawsuit. I told him to save his money as far as going to court. He was thinking about hiring a lawyer and going to court over it. He said, "I just retired." And he said, "In order to put different furnaces and heat and everything in these houses," he said, "there's no utility companies close." He said, "I'll have to go back to work to be able to afford to do it." And he was really irate. But I've had 4 or 5 calls like that. I had one this morning from a local businessman here in Marietta. I don't have a liberty to mention his name. He's in the heating and plumbing business. And he told me that his well was flooded at his house, not too far from where my business is. And what could he do about it? Once they're flooded, they're ruined for good. But it's sad, folks, that people will allow this to happen. My boy told me that no other state in the union would permit wells along the fault line. He said that is an absolute no-no. And the map that he got off of the computer for me, or offline, was a map that the state of Ohio did, run seismic and everything up and down this river several years ago. He studied it when he was in geology class at Marietta College, and he never forgot it. They did this study thinking that they could pump the emissions from the coal-fired power plants all the way up and down this river underground, instead of putting it in the air and putting the scrubbers and everything they put in these coal-fired power plants. When they found all these fault lines down through here, they thought they couldn't do that because it would end up in their water supply. So guess what we're doing today? And I just want to bring it to your attention. And I don't know what will become of this. I hope we can get our day in court. I've lost a lot of confidence in our country, my folks. There's so much politics and so much corruption takes place over a dollar bill that it's awful. I've got fellow oil and gas producers that I've worked for. I've had my own business now for 48 years this year. They quit coming to my business because we filed this lawsuit. And they know that they can't continue to do this. It's going to have repercussions. But Glenn is my brother-in-law. His wife and my wife are sisters, and I called him this morning, and he said, "You couldn't come to the meeting tonight, could you?" And I said, "Out at the church," and he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Come and refresh those people's minds." I said, "Some of them may have been there at the last meeting that I attended here, but let them know anything new that's going on." But we hope we get a good report back from this appeals court panel, and we can get our case in court, because we don't figure there's 12 people anywhere in the United States who rule against what's going on here in the Ohio Valley. Does anyone have any questions?
So can public opinion sway the outcome of anything? Is there anything that we could do?
I don't know if there's a whole lot you can do. Glenn was at the meeting. They had a meeting down at the Catholic Church at Little Hockey.
We were there.
You were there.
Yeah.
And practically every person in there was against that disposal well. The state was down there and wanted to permit a disposal well. Another one in Little Hockey. On 14 acres of land, friends. The first load of water they put in there went off of that 14 acres when they pumped it in the ground onto somebody's property. I've got probably 3,000 acres under lease that's held by wells from the top to the surface down that has been ruined by these people. They'll never be able to drill it. It's landowners' land. They'll never get a penny off of their oil and gas on that land because it's all been flooded. And it's a known fact. It's what's below the surface of your land is worth way more than what's on top of it. And it's a crime, and most people don't know anything about this. But my machinist figured out an area. I've got wells over 5 miles from Redbird Disposal Well on Vito that are flooded. 5 miles the way the crow flies from that well. My plumber figured it out. If I remember correctly, it was either 67 or 76,000 acres that runs clear around that well, 5-mile radius of land that's flooded of people that don't even realize it, that their minerals are shot.
Let me get him first.
I'm sorry, have I taken too much?
No, you're okay.
Bob, thank you for kindly informing the people. Could you just confirm who the lawsuit is against? And I'm pretty sure they're going to take this fight all the way to the Supreme Court too. Am I wrong?
They told me, my lawyer told me, our lawyer, Bob and I, it's a large law firm, very large law firm. They have offices in Wheeling, Pittsburgh, and Columbus. They've been involved in lawsuits like this before, and they're very efficient.
Can you confirm for the people who it's actually against, the lawsuit?
The lawsuit is filed against each one of these disposal wells in this whole area around here that could possibly contaminate any of our wells. And
Who's the defendant?
Kelly got it. I couldn't think of the word. Yes.
the defendant,
Ziploc bag.
The defendant, who did you sue? The companies?
the companies that own these disposal wells. One of them is down here on Route 7 where the rest stop is between Washington and Athens County. There's a rest stop down there on the left, going south. One of them up on the bank there is owned by a company by the name of Tallgrass out of Texas. They're a multi-billion-dollar company, I've heard. I do know they paid upwards of $50–60 million for that disposal well after it was put into production a few years. And they are being sued. There's, I think, 6 or 8 different disposal wells that's within the area where we're affected by it.
Have you spoken with any of the other states down the river about this situation? I would think that they would be concerned about that.
I'm sorry, I wear these blooming hearing aids, and they help me a little, but not a lot.
That's all right. What I'm asking is, have you talked to any of the other states down the river because their concerns would be big about this. Say Indiana or Kentucky.
We haven't talked to any other states, but there are people down in Athens County. I can't speak for my lawyers if they've talked to other people in the states, but down in Athens County, they've been fighting this for several years and couldn't get nowhere. And they really got behind us and tried to help us, the people that's been fighting it down there, because they said we're the first ones that's had a legal, legitimate, what should be a very binding case.
I would think that if you talk to people in Indiana, they'd be concerned, or Kentucky.
I don't know about, I know we have, to my knowledge, they haven't really been contacted there.
I think the big thing is they're not going to see it initially. It's going to be water that travels down to them. This water's coming up in people's yards. I mean, I work with people, they're like, during a drought, my property never used to have water in it. And it's wet now. But it's like if you talk to people, everybody knows it, but nobody will get together and stand and say, we're not going to put up with it anymore.
Joe Tucker, maybe some of you know him, used to be the Marietta City engineer. He just retired recently. He called me and he said, Bob, he lives out there not far from the Redbird disposal well. He called me and he said, Bob, he said, could that water come to surface? And I said, most certainly could. And he said, I've got a wet place that comes in my backyard. And he said, it never used to be that way. It was always dry. He said, I can't even mow it now. It's so wet. And he said, it's wet the year round. Even when everything else is dry as can be, it's wet. And I had a farmer call me from out in that area, asked me the same question. He said his father farmed the farm before he did. And he said, never before did we got 6 wet spots in our hayfield now. We can't even go over to mow. And what my son told me, and I don't want to take up too much time, but he told me, he said, Dad, I called my son, I talked to him about these wet spots. And he said, I said, Brad, his name's Brad Lane, I said, Brad, I said, how come I wouldn't kill the grass in his yard if it's coming from these brine wells? Because it's full of salt and everything else that's detriment to anything to grow in. And he said, Dad, he said, that's just a minor warning. He said, the worst is yet to come. He said, this brine water is anywhere from 3 to 6 pounds per gallon heavier than fresh water. He said, when they pump up the ground, he said, it will stay on bottom and force the fresh water up because it's lighter. It'll lift the fresh water, the heavy water stays down. And he said, by the time you find out it's brine water in your yard, he said, it's way too late. It's going to be in your water supply, it's going to be everywhere. So that's what he told me, only made sense to me.
Thank you, Bob.